The Netherlands are leaders in greenhouse farming. They are a great solution to save water, but it's a bigger challenge to power them. Crops growing inside need heating and cooling, and that uses a lot of energy. We travel the country to meet scientists and entrepreneurs working on climate-smart greenhouses.
Cycle through the Dutch countryside and you'll be surrounded with cows. But from the air, you will see fields of high-tech structures where fruit and vegetables are cultivated. Greenhouses have helped make this tiny country the second largest exporter of agricultural goods behind the United States. A leader on the market, Van der Hoeven, has been designing climate-controlled farms since 1935.
Greenhouses are just as Dutch as wooden shoes, as tulips. It's a cliché, but it's true. The greenhouse was invented in the Netherlands in the 19th century when they started putting grapes under glass to improve production.
Van der Hoeven built the Rainbow Grower Farm 50 kilometers north of Amsterdam on a 25-hectare plot. 8 tons of peppers are harvested here every year. Greenhouses produce more crops but use less water than an open field.
It allows you to fully control the climate inside the greenhouse, being temperature, humidity, but also controlling the levels of pests and insects. There is a demand definitely for clients to build sustainable greenhouses with efficient use of energy and to reduce as much as possible the use of fresh water, electricity, and that's where our challenge lies at the moment.
95% of the company's turnover comes from selling its greenhouses abroad. The Middle East and China are the largest markets. But the problem is greenhouses consume a lot of energy and facilities must be adapted.
When you build a greenhouse nowadays, there will be limitations on where you can build because it all depends on availability of energy.
In 2018, Rainbow Grower and other greenhouse operators invested in a project led by ECW, a private energy company that's managed to cut back 50% of its natural gas use for heating. It sells geothermal energy extracted from a well 2,000 meters deep. The pumped-out water is 80 degrees Celsius, warm enough to heat at least some parts of the greenhouses.
It's very clean energy, sustainable energy, because the heat in the earth originates over there. Geothermal energy is more or less a local source of energy. It's technically possible to transport geothermal heat, but it's limited to, well, maybe several kilometers.
Solar thermal energy is another source of energy for greenhouses, but it's hard to store. So this startup, Solhor, has come up with a solution that can be found inside this container. It's called Sprout, which stands for Solar-Powered Horticultural Off-Grid Unit, a miracle with a complicated name.
The Sprout is the only solar energy-based system that can power a greenhouse farm 24/7. And what it does, it uses solar energy as an input to generate all the energy flows required to operate a greenhouse farm: heating, cooling, and electricity. So what you can see in this picture is a solar field of flat plate collectors. So we heat up water, we store it in our thermal storage, which we call the test mod. And then from here, we harvest this thermal energy either for heating or for cooling through a thermal chiller or for electricity through a power unit. So in this way, we end up with a system that uses only the sun to generate all the energy streams required to operate a greenhouse farms.
The project was recently tested in the south of France. It is targeting clients worldwide who need heating and cooling solutions.
The idea is to install these facilities in the south of Europe, North Africa, and Middle East. Areas where there is a lot of sun, but no infrastructure to power these greenhouses.
With 2 major universities at the forefront of sustainable agriculture, the Netherlands has created an environment where scientists and business investors such as Adriano can thrive, proving you can improve food production while using sustainable greenhouse-based agriculture.
There we saw an example of grand-scale sustainable agriculture. What do you think of this greenhouse model?
Well, this greenhouse model is part of a series of farming systems which try to optimize the use of land and produce the maximum food on a small amount of land, which is great because it's part of the whole need to be very efficient in the way we use resources. The problem is you need to also look at the other inputs and resources needed to produce the food. So if you're in a place where you don't have a lot of water, you need to think twice before promoting that kind of model. Taking another model which also aims at maximizing the use of land, but also, in this case, maximizes the use of water, so reduces the use of water for the same amount of food, it's vertical farming. But whatever the system, these sophisticated systems, they cannot produce everything. And in particular, they cannot produce staple crops like cereals, they cannot produce trees that produce fruits, and they cannot produce oil crops, for example. So you need also the other systems that use land to complement these systems.
What about smallholders and small-scale businesses?
In that case, again, if the energy is affordable, is reliable and sustainable, it's great. But in these cases in particular, you need to be particularly careful in one thing is integrating it with the uses of other assets like land, like water, no competition. But for example, also the use of residues from food chains, which seem fantastic solution. You need to look at the way they may be used for other things, like in farms for soil fertility or animal feed.
Should certain energy sources be banned?
I would say no. The ones that are usually pointed at is fossil fuel. But you cannot change overnight from fossil fuel to renewables. If to produce food and reduce food losses, the only available energy and affordable energy is fossil, let's go first for that. You need to give time for things to evolve and farmers to afford maybe renewable energy. The other big one, which is normally pointed at, is biofuels, because it's part of it uses the same feedstock as to produce food. For instance, you have what we call flex crops, like corn, which produces ethanol, so biofuel, but the byproduct is animal feed. Biofuels, again, it's promoted as absolutely a needed pathway for climate change, but you have to be careful the way you do it. The good news is that we know how to do it right.
Thanks, Olivier. We'll talk a little bit more about bioenergy in a moment. Because after the break, we head to Uganda to meet a man who is trying to change energy consumption by turning farm waste into bioenergy.
We feel we need to have alternative fuels to support the growing population.